What's up, my friends? U.S. Army veteran Christopher Chaos. We're going to talk about some news stories happening in the Army, military a little bit in general. We're going to talk about this new details that have come out from the soldier you may have heard of that hijacked a bus to get out of basic training and try to flee. There's some new details that have kind of recently come out. We'll talk about that. We also have a little bit of information about like Afghanistan and a few stories that are kind of involved with Afghanistan. So we'll dive deeper into those. But let's start off with this soldier that you may have heard of that tried to flee basic training and hijacked a bus and had a unloaded M4, but you know, obviously the people didn't know it was unloaded, but nonetheless tried to escape in that manner. So it's quite possible you probably heard about this soldier, right? This individual, or this trainee, I guess not even a soldier anymore, but this person that was potentially trying to become a soldier that was at Fort Jackson, took off with a bus. There's some kids involved. They had an M4, but it was unloaded. Eventually let everybody go and then eventually ditched the bus and everything too. But there is some more information that it's kind of talking about inside of here as far as some more of the details that kind of came about and some more information that's kind of come about. But basically starting off that the drill sergeants knew he took off. He didn't like slip away undetected. It was around 7 o'clock in the morning. I guess they just finished up with PT and everything like that. And they all had their weapons and he took off and the drill sergeants yelled at him, tried to kind of stop him. They basically says that he actually was chased by drill sergeants on foot. He got to a point where he ended up like jumping a fence and took off across this interstate. There's like 6 lanes of freeway and everything like that. And people did call 911. There was people on the highway that, said this, they saw this soldier running across the freeway. The drill sergeants called 911 to let them know this person took off and hopped the fence. Now, the fence, there's nothing wrong with the fence there. It talks about that in this article that the intention is not to keep people in. It's not prison. It's to keep other people out so that people can't get into the base. So I guess technically they easily can get out. I don't know how it kind of ends up working. I figure if it's easy to get out, it should be also easy to get in. But nonetheless, that's what they kind of talk about in this article. Is talk about that it's not really designed to keep people in. It's designed to keep people out. So there's nothing necessarily wrong with the fence, I guess. So he, I guess, told the driver here that he didn't want to hurt anybody, but he wanted to be taken to the next town. And here's the individual. If you haven't kind of seen the video footage, you haven't seen like the photos and everything like that. So that he's talking about that he was flustered and later released the driver and the children. A few miles later, ended up abandoning the vehicle and the rifle as well inside the vehicle, and then he was arrested without incident. As a result of this, there's some things that are going to be changing, and some of the stuff like they mentioned in here, I wasn't aware they even did it this way in the first place. The changes are kind of going back to the way I thought it was anyways, but let's talk about a little bit of the changes. Some of the changes are talking about like some more frequent missing and AWOL soldier drills, so just to kind of get more accountability and work on their ways to kind of account for soldiers. Not necessarily saying that that's what went wrong here, but that can end up leading to issues. So they're kind of increasing some of those frequencies of those kind of drills. So one of the key things is saying the pause in the weapon immersion training in place for the foreseeable future. The thing is I thought that was always a thing anyways. Apparently they do more immersion with the weapons, regardless if you're doing training with weapons anyways. Like when I went through basic training, we would draw our weapons and hang on to them if we were going to the range. If it was going to be anything outside of that, then we would just either have like it's called like the rubber duckies, the rubber M4s or M16s, and you'd do training with that. You'd only have the actual M4s if we were going to a range. And apparently at Fort Jackson they were doing it regardless. So sometimes you would have it 24/7 and then you hang on to it, not loaded or anything like that. You wouldn't get actually any ammo unless you were on the range, but you wouldn't have the rifle at all, or you would have the rifle all the time and then just ammo during the range part. But when I was in, you wouldn't have your rifle 24/7. It got still kept in their arms room, and then you drew it out in the morning if we were heading to the range. Well, apparently they're going, I guess, back to that kind of route type of thing. So that's basically the way it was for me when I went through basic. I think the Air Force is even way more stricter than that. I think they don't even like walk with their weapons. I think they just show up at the range and then receive their rifles at the range. But in the Army, we usually, would march with them, do some training with them. And then when we're doing a live fire exercise, then, have live ammo then. But they were kind of doing it where they had a lot more often. So they're just kind of getting away from that, apparently. That may start arguments for some old school individuals being, oh, they're going soft on them and stuff like that. I mean, no, you probably did something similar like I did. You probably didn't have your weapon with you all the time when you're in basic training, at least, right? We would do that in the field, and we would do that actually in the Army, but initial training usually wouldn't do that. So in here, they're talking about, like, while we've removed weapons immersion out of the instructional period, what we haven't done is remove the amount of time they spend on the range. So yeah, and it says we've seen a slight increase in the marksmanship skills since the incident. I don't know what would change to make that a little bit better, but yeah, I mean, they're not changing the amount of time that they spend down range. You're just not hanging onto the weapon all the time. I mean, that's not going to change your value of training. You're going to hang onto the weapon all the time when you go to the field once you actually get to your duty station anyways. So not a big deal, I don't feel like. And even here, it kind of even says, because if you've never touched a weapon before, just carrying it doesn't make you familiar with it. So doing the drills do. I mean, so yeah, I agree with that. So that change, I don't think it's a big deal. Safety, cool, but I don't think that really makes that big of a difference. There's a few other changes they kind of talk about in here, like more accountability by the drill sergeants to make sure everybody's where they're supposed to be. So probably puts a little bit extra stress on the soldiers because now your drill sergeant's probably going to be hanging around you more often. Some more mental health resources and all sorts of other things. They're kind of making some adjustments towards to try to prevent it in the future. This isn't something that happens all the time, right? This isn't like a thing like, well, it's about time. I mean, this is the first time I've ever heard about anybody hijacking things. I mean, there might have been other times where soldiers try to go AWOL, yeah, but probably not to this same extent as this incident. This incident's a pretty isolated type of incident. So maybe what are you guys' thoughts on this whole thing? I mean, do you think that it really matters if you have your weapon with you 24/7 in initial training? You know, I could see like a problem with it if you were doing it like in the field when you actually went to your unit, but during initial training, as long as you're still doing the same amount of range time, cool deal. But I'd like to hear maybe some even individuals out there that maybe recently went through basic training, OSIT. How often did you have your weapon with you? Like I said, for me, only when we went to the range or on range days, we'd march with them and everything like that. Outside of that, usually had the fake ones. But I'd love to hear from you guys what you guys had experience with. Now from here, let's move over to some things happening in Afghanistan. If you didn't hear, we actually now no longer have any U.S. troops in Afghanistan. On the 30th of August, the last plane left out, I guess, just prior to midnight, making it official, there is no longer any U.S. military in Afghanistan. We have people like nearby-ish. I think there's some people still in Kuwait and maybe even some in Iraq or other locations too. But Afghanistan itself, none. There's nobody there. So maybe a little bit of a tip there is if you're someone that's talking to someone online and they're telling you about how they're in Afghanistan right now and they need money or gift cards or something like that. No, there's no more U.S. military in Afghanistan right now. So, I mean, a pretty crazy thing because, I mean, that's the first time in, 20 years, something like that, since we've had U.S. military in Afghanistan. So they've kind of done that. In my personal opinion, like I won't get into any kind of involvement with whether I feel the way they did it was right or this or that or whatever kind of a thing. But I do kind of feel like it'll probably end up being a thing where we'll be back. We'll probably be back in Afghanistan. We'll be back to doing something in Afghanistan. I don't think it's just going to kind of end there. I mean, I could be wrong. I'm not psychic. I'm not expert in, those tactics as far as what it'll lead to, but I get the feeling, I'm sure that a lot of people are out there that kind of have the same kind of feeling too, that we'll probably have military back in Afghanistan at some point in time. It might be in a few months, it might be several years, who knows, but I feel like it didn't just end right there. So with the U.S. military leaving Afghanistan, that means there's a lot of equipment that's basically left behind. And we kind of talk about it here. Now, a lot of this equipment was left for the Afghan military to be able to defend themselves against the Taliban and everything else like that. So most of the equipment was for that purpose, and they just kind of basically retreated and abandoned that equipment so that the Taliban could take it over. So that's why the stuff ends up being there. And this kind of chart kind of shows you a little bit of an idea as to some of that stuff. I mean, from 2003 all the way to 2016, I don't know if there was anything after 2016 that was brought over. But I mean, you got a lot of communication equipment, vehicles. I mean, look at this, over 75,000 vehicles, weapons. I mean, shoot, more than 500,000 weapons right there. Explosive ordnance. You got some intelligence and surveillance equipment. You even have aircrafts, 208, which you've probably seen on social media, some videos of them trying to use it. And in this article, it even kind of explains it too, that they don't have actually the knowledge of how to fly them. Most of them don't, anyways. Very few probably do, but they're not able to maintain those things. A lot of them aren't really operational. So they say even inside of here that they're unstable due to lack of training, spare parts, and logistics required to operate such equipment. So that's in regards to like the Blackhawks, like the UH-60s. So Maybe they can fly some of them, but even if, let's say, they do able to fly them, how long is that going to last? How long before things start to break? Because if you've ever been around military equipment, things break. And if you don't know or don't have the proper training on how to fix that stuff, you're not going to be able to get it back up and operational. So I think I have seen some video footage of some helicopters being flown around Afghanistan. So obviously there are some people that either figured it out or had a little bit of knowledge, but how long will that last? How long will they be able to utilize those before the equipment starts to break down because it's not being properly maintained, not being properly cared for? That may even be the case with like vehicles, but to a certain extent, the vehicles are definitely going to last longer than like a helicopter and everything. But how much training do they really have with knowing how to maintain those things? So there was a lot of stuff left behind. I even saw some things where it's talking about how for like the Kabul airport, right? So that was a recent thing of them kind of pulling out a lot of equipment there. They made sure to basically demilitarize it. They've made sure to make it unserviceable, make it unusable to anybody. So aircrafts, vehicles, generators, whatever, everything they possibly could that they couldn't take with them. They brought some stuff back and got it out of there, but there was a lot of stuff they had to leave behind. And so they left it, unserviceable and damaged it in some ways. So that way, when it happens or if it happens, whatever the case is, Taliban gets into Kabul, then they can go and, they won't be able to use that equipment either. So that's kind of a key thing with that equipment, because that stuff, now that they're going to probably take over it. So they did at least have a chance to limit some of the equipment that they had the immediate control of before evacuating. The other stuff, like I said, that was stuff that they thought the Afghan army was going to use to defend themselves, and that just didn't really happen. Some crazy things I even also seen is some video footage that like some Marines and some other individuals had to still clean up before they evacuated the area. And yeah, I get the point. They kind of are talking about in there why they're mad that they had to clean up is that we're basically cleaning this up for the Taliban, for them to come take over this airport and have it cleaned because we cleaned up after ourselves when we left. I mean, it doesn't seem like as much of a point. I think I saw some more in the comments on one of the posts that I saw where people were talking about, like, if they're cleaning up to throw it away or basically destroy any kind of evidence of like contact information from locals or maybe some of the people that evacuated or whatever, then I can understand that. But yeah, if they're just picking up general trash to pick up trash and clean up the place, then yeah, that kind of sucks, and it's kind of probably pointless. I mean, some people may have the thing of like, oh, we just got to leave it better than we had it, but I don't think this is kind of in that kind of case where you should, need to clean up before you leave. Screw it. Leave the place the way it was. They're going to take over. They're going to trash the place anyways. They're going to come in there and do who knows what, right? So I don't feel like it's necessary for them to clean up after themselves, but they did. So they're kind of forced to. I guess maybe a lot of people didn't really want to. But the other thing that kind of started surfacing kind of from that too was people were concerned because they started seeing like these cages for dogs and everything like that. And so they thought that maybe the military left behind a bunch of military working dogs. The Department of Defense is saying that is not the case. They are saying that they're not military working dogs. The photos circulating online are animals under the care of the Kabul. Oops. As we go to Twitter here for it, but from the Kabul animal basically rescue. So you have the photos here that have been kind of going around. So people were thinking that these were like military working dogs that the military left behind, and they're saying that no, it's the local animal rescue. All of the military working dogs were evacuated out of there, but these were rescue dogs that the Kabul individuals, the locals, were taken care of, and they kind of left it under their care. What happened after they left? I mean, I guess that we don't know, but these were not military working dogs. So those were some stories that I figured I'd cover here in this video here. I have links to all of the articles if you want to read more details as to what was happening in these articles. I'll provide those links down below. Love to hear your guys' comments as far as what do you feel about, that individual that took off, from Fort Jackson and tried to escape. What do you think about, some of the stuff that's happening in Afghanistan with us finally, not having any military individuals in Afghanistan anymore, all that equipment, and maybe the possibility of what could have happened to these dogs. I mean, they're not military working dogs, at least that's what the Department of Defense says, but, I'm an animal lover, it still sucks regardless, but I mean, yeah, I understand you can't just evacuate all these dogs, but yeah, what do you guys think? If you guys want to check out some more of my videos, check these out right here. Thanks for hanging out. I'm Christopher Chaos. I'll see you next time. See ya.